Have you ever trusted a promise so deeply that it became your reason to breathe, only to watch it fall apart in silence? This isn't just a love story. It's about losing someone, losing yourself, and somehow finding your voice again. If you've ever been hurt and wondered whether it's still possible to believe in love, or even to believe in yourself, stay with me. Because sometimes what breaks you can also teach you how to speak again. The Winter Promise. It was one of those Danish afternoons when the world seemed frozen in both weather and emotion. The kind of cold that bites through your jacket and quietly asks, "Are you sure you belong here?" I remember standing by the window of my small apartment in Aarhus, watching snowflakes dance like tiny pieces of hope, fragile, pure, and temporary. That was the day he promised me forever. He said it softly, like the snow itself. "We'll make this work, no matter how hard it gets." And for a second, I believed him more than I believed in gravity. Because when someone says, "forever," you don't question it. You wrap your whole heart around it and call it home. But here's the strange part. Forever sounds different when you're far from home. In Denmark, everything felt beautifully calm on the outside but quietly lonely inside. I was still struggling with English back then, not the grammar but the confidence. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, my voice came out too soft, like it didn't belong to me. That winter I started speaking English mostly with him. He became my practice partner, my bridge between two worlds. Every night we'd talk about dreams, movies, or random thoughts in English. And I thought, this is how I'll finally sound natural. This is how I'll grow. But promises, like accents, can be deceptive. They sound smooth at first, until you start noticing the cracks. I didn't know it yet, but his forever would become my first real English lesson about impermanence. There's a saying that stuck with me. We don't learn language from textbooks. We learn it from pain, repetition, and the courage to stay. That winter taught me all three. Because love, just like language, isn't about being perfect. It's about trying, failing, and still daring to say something out loud, even when your voice shakes. If you're watching this and you've lost someone, or maybe you've lost your confidence to speak, to try, to learn, remember this. The words you whisper in your weakest moments might one day become the strongest part of your voice. The snow that year eventually melted, but his promise stayed frozen in my memory. Not as something to regret, but as a beginning, because that's when I realized every forever has an accent. And sometimes, it's the silence after the promise that teaches you how to speak again. When forever started to fade, you never notice when forever begins to fade. It doesn't happen in a dramatic fight or a stormy goodbye. It happens quietly, like snow melting under your shoes while you're too busy pretending it's still winter. First, it was small things. He stopped replying as fast. Our late-night talks turned into short messages. "I'm tired. Talk later." The warmth that used to fill every word slowly disappeared. But I kept convincing myself, he's just busy. I'm just overthinking. That's the funny thing about hope. It's both your greatest strength and your most dangerous addiction. You keep sipping it even when you know it's poison. One evening, we were sitting in the same cafe where he first said, "We'll make this work." The candle between us flickered, and I realized we'd been silent for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And I had no idea what to say. I wanted to ask, "Are we okay?" But the words got stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat. That's when I learned something strange about language. Silence also speaks. When someone stops asking about your day, stops finishing your sentences, they're saying something. You just don't want to translate. In those weeks, my English actually got worse. My sentences were fine, but my confidence cracked. I stopped practicing aloud. Every time I tried to repeat a phrase, I heard his voice in my head, not as comfort, but as an echo. Psychologists call it emotional interference. Your brain links certain words with memories. If those memories hurt, your brain tries to protect you by avoiding those words. That's why even saying forever felt like touching fire. One night, I opened our old chat history and started reading our messages out loud. Slowly, word by word. It hurt, but also healed. Because the truth is, pain can be a language teacher too. It forces you to pronounce every feeling clearly. I realized that losing someone doesn't mean losing your voice. It means learning a new accent, one shaped by resilience, not romanced. So if you're holding on to a fading promise, don't rush to forget it. Listen to it. Translate it. Understand what it taught you. Because sometimes the lesson isn't about keeping someone, it's about keeping yourself. And that's when I understood. Love doesn't always vanish. It just changes its vocabulary. The silence between words. It's strange how silence can sound louder than any scream. When two people stop talking, the air between them becomes heavy, like invisible snow piling up, slowly burying everything warm beneath it. We still met sometimes. Same city, same streets, same cafe. But the rhythm was gone. Before, our conversations flowed like music. Now they sounded like broken lyrics. I'd ask questions just to fill the space. He'd answer with words that felt rehearsed, polite, careful, distant. And I realized something. You can't fake energy. You can't fake connection. Even your heartbeat knows when someone stops listening. One afternoon, I tried to talk about my English lessons, how I was learning to pronounce words like thought, through, and though. He smiled, but his eyes were somewhere else. That's when I stopped mid-sentence. I could literally feel the silence swallowing me. The funny thing is, silence also has grammar. It teaches you when to pause, when to end a sentence, when to finally stop speaking to someone who's no longer there. Linguists say that pauses are where real communication happens, where your brain processes meaning. But in love, those pauses can turn into walls. And if you're not careful, you start building them higher every day. I began to hear my own voice echoing inside my head. It was uncertain, fragile, like a beginner learning to speak again. So I did something unexpected. I started recording myself reading short English texts. Slowly, clearly, with emotion. I wanted to remember what I sounded like before silence became my teacher. The first time I played it back, I cried. Not because of the accent, but because that voice, trembling, imperfect, human, was still mine. That's when it hit me. Love might disappear, but your voice doesn't have to. When someone stops hearing you, you still can. And that's powerful. Maybe you're in that place right now where you're trying to hold a conversation that's already over. Don't be afraid to stop talking. Sometimes silence is just life's way of giving you back your own words. Because here's the truth. Every heartbreak rewrites your dictionary. It changes the meaning of forever, of home, of us. But if you listen closely, it also gives you a new word, freedom. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most honest word of all. Crying in a foreign language. There's something surreal about crying in a country where no one speaks your mother tongue. The tears feel heavier, almost foreign, like they too are trying to translate your pain into another language. It happened on a gray afternoon in Aarhus. The sky hung low, the wind sharp like glass. I was walking home after class, my headphones on, pretending to listen to an English podcast but not really hearing anything. Then suddenly it just hit me. That quiet ache you can't name. The one that starts in your chest and spreads everywhere. I stopped in the middle of the street. People passed by speaking Danish, #farvel. Sounds that rolled past me like a river I couldn't enter. I realized I wasn't just lost in love. I was lost in translation. When you live abroad, loneliness has layers. You don't just miss someone. You miss being understood. You miss the ease of words that don't require effort. So when your heart breaks, even crying feels like homework. I sat on a bench by the canal, watching my reflection in the water. My eyes were red, my nose running, but somehow I laughed. Because there I was, crying in Denmark, heartbroken in 2 languages. The scene was so dramatic it could have been a movie. And that's when a strange thought came to me. Maybe this was the lesson. Maybe life was teaching me not just how to speak English, but how to feel in it. Every heartbreak has its vocabulary. Goodbye. Let go. Move on. You don't learn these in school. You learn them the hard way, so I started whispering to myself in English. It's okay. You're okay. First it sounded fake. But repetition has power. It's the same rule for language learning and for healing. The more you repeat something, the more your brain starts to believe it. That moment by the canal changed everything. I realized that maybe you can't control who leaves, but you can control the story you tell yourself after they do. If you've ever cried in a foreign language, know this. Those tears are proof that your heart is bilingual. It understands pain in every tongue. And that's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Finding my voice again. It started quietly, like all healing does. No dramatic breakthroughs, no perfect plans. Just a whisper. Try again. After weeks of silence, I picked up my old notebook where I'd once written English words with tiny hearts beside them. Hope, dream, forever. I crossed out the last one and replaced it with voice. That day I decided to rebuild mine. Every morning before work I'd make coffee, stand by the window, and read aloud one page from anything I could find. A short story, a news article, even random YouTube subtitles. I didn't care about sounding perfect. I just wanted to hear myself again. First, my tongue felt heavy, my accent uneven like a bicycle chain stuck on a rusty gear. But something magical happens when you show up every day. Your brain adapts. Psychologists call it neuroplasticity. The ability of your brain to rewire itself through repetition and emotion. The same process that helps a child learn to speak also helps an adult find their confidence again. And honestly, it wasn't just English I was learning. It was self-respect. That I began to treat my speaking practice like therapy. When I said, I am strong, I didn't just repeat a sentence. I made a promise to myself. When I said, I can start again, I believed it a little more each time. Sometimes I'd record my voice and listen back. It was awkward. Who likes hearing their own accent? But over time that sound became comforting. Because it was proof. I'm still here. The biggest change came the day I realized I didn't need his voice to correct mine anymore. I had learned to listen differently, not just with my ears but with empathy for myself. And here's something funny. The better I got at speaking English, the easier it became to speak to myself. I stopped apologizing for my accent, for my past, for not being perfect. Maybe that's what finding your voice really means, not sounding like a native but sounding like you. So if you're watching this and your voice trembles when you speak English, let it. Because shaking is still movement. And movement means you're alive. That's how I found my voice again. Not in a classroom, not in a conversation, but in the quiet moments when I dared to speak even though no one was listening. Learning from the cracks. There's a saying I once read. The cracks are where the light gets in. First, I thought it was just poetic nonsense. But then I started to see it, not in theory but in myself. Every mistake I made while speaking English, every awkward pause, every moment of heartbreak, they weren't failures. They were cracks. And through them something began to shine. Awareness, understanding, growth. One night, while scrolling through videos about language learning, I found a neuroscientist explaining why we remember emotionally charged moments so vividly. When something hurts, your brain releases chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, burning that memory deep into your neural map. That's why we remember heartbreaks better than birthdays. Pain sharpens the memory. And I thought, what if that's not a curse? What if it's a tool? I began turning every painful memory into a lesson. When I remembered him saying forever, I repeated it slowly, focusing on the pronunciation, on the rhythm. When I recalled our last conversation, I rewrote it in my notebook, this time ending it the way I wished I had, strong, calm, and controlled. That's the magic of learning from pain. You get to rewrite the script. You get to decide which words stay and which ones finally leave. And here's a secret most language teachers don't tell you. Your brain learns fastest when emotion is involved. It doesn't care if it's joy or sadness. It just cares that you feel. Because feeling means focus. And focus means memory. So I started embracing my cracks. The broken grammar, the wrong tenses, the heartbreaks that taught me vocabulary I never wanted to learn. Regret. Goodbye. Heal. I said them out loud, not as wounds but as workouts. Slowly, English stopped being something I chased and became something I lived. It wasn't a subject anymore. It was my reflection, imperfect but real. You see, we often try to cover our cracks, to hide the parts that hurt. But language, like love, becomes more beautiful when it's raw, when it shows its scars. Because scars are proof that you tried, that you felt, that you kept going. So if your journey feels messy, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Learn from it. Because the cracks in your confidence might just be where your fluency begins. The mirror moment. One morning I stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush still in my hand, and caught my reflection mid-thought. Not the tired eyes or messy hair, but something deeper. Quiet shift. For the first time, I wasn't seeing someone broken. I was seeing someone becoming. It's strange, isn't it? You can spend years chasing someone else's approval. A lover, a teacher, a native speaker, and forget to notice the person right in front of you. The one who kept showing up even when it hurt. The one who kept speaking even when no one was listening. That morning I said out loud, "Good morning," in English. My voice cracked a little. Then I laughed, really laughed, because it no longer mattered whether it was perfect. It was mine. That I realized that's what language learning and healing have in common. Both are mirrors. They don't change what you are. They reveal it. Every word you say is a reflection of how much courage you've gathered, how many fears you've faced, how many times you've refused to stay silent. And when you start to see yourself not as a failure but as a learner, everything changes. The world stops feeling like a test you can fail. It becomes a conversation you're finally brave enough to join. That day, I recorded a short video of myself reading one paragraph in English. My hands trembled, my heart raced, but I did it anyway. Then I watched it back, expecting to cringe. Instead, I smiled, because for the first time I didn't hear mistakes. I heard progress. That it's funny how healing sounds. It's not dramatic, it's steady. Like a quiet rhythm that builds inside you until you realize you're no longer surviving, you're participating. That's when I understood. I didn't lose my voice because of him. I gave it away, and now I was taking it back. And maybe that's what recovery really means, not forgetting the winter but learning how to sing in it. The return of spring. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But one morning I woke up to birdsong, real delicate, almost shy. The same balcony that once felt like a frozen memory was now bathed in sunlight, and I realized winter had quietly stepped aside. That I made a cup of coffee, opened my window, and for the first time in months, breathed without thinking about him. The air felt lighter. The silence felt kind. That I sat down with my notebook, but instead of rewriting the past, I began to write dreams. Small ones at first. Speak English with confidence. Travel alone to a place I've never been. Trust again. They weren't just goals. They were seeds. Because that's what spring is. Not a reward for surviving, but a chance to grow from what nearly broke you. That I started recording short English videos, nervous, imperfect, but real. Every comment, every like, every new follower felt like a little flower blooming from the soil of something I once thought was dead. And one evening, I got a message from a stranger. Your voice helped me start speaking again. I stared at it for a long time. That single sentence felt like the universe whispering, see? You were meant to go through it, not to stay there, but to light the way for someone else. That's when I understood what the winter promise truly meant. That it wasn't his promise to me. It was mine to myself. A vow that even in the coldest moments, I'd keep the light alive inside me, because maybe love isn't about someone staying forever. Maybe it's about learning to stay with yourself as the sun dipped low. I whispered softly, both in English and in my own language. Thank you for leaving. Because losing you led me back to me. And in that quiet, golden moment, I finally smiled. Not the practiced smile for others, but the kind that blooms naturally when your heart remembers its own warmth. Spring had returned. And this time it was mine. The last lesson: love, language, and letting go. If you followed me through this story, thank you. Because this isn't just about love or heartbreak. It's about what happens when you stop translating your pain into silence. When you finally let every word, every sound, every broken promise become part of your new language. Not of English, but of healing. Learning English taught me more than grammar and pronunciation. Taught me patience. It taught me to listen, not only to native speakers, but to the quiet voice inside that says, You can start again. Every sentence I struggled to form mirrored a feeling I once couldn't express. Every word I mispronounced reminded me that growth is messy, not perfect. And every time I hit record, trembling with doubt, I realized something beautiful. You don't need perfect English to tell your story. You just need your voice. People often ask me, "Do you still believe in love?" And I smile, because love isn't something that breaks or disappears. It simply changes form. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a passion. Sometimes it's a voice you finally learn to trust again. Your OW and so if you're watching this and you've ever been hurt by love, by failure, by your own fear, I want you to know something. Your heart is not broken. It's bilingual. It speaks pain and hope. It understands endings and beginnings. And that's why you're still here learning, listening, trying again. So the next time you practice English and your tongue stumbles, remember this. It's not just your accent, it's your courage trying to find its rhythm. And when you finally say, "I'm okay," in a language that once felt impossible, that's not just progress. That's poetry, because real fluency isn't speaking without mistakes, that it's living without fear of them. So keep speaking. Keep believing. Keep growing. And when someone asks, "What's your secret?" you can just smile and say, "I trained my heart the same way I trained my ears, slowly, patiently, and with love."